All right, welcome to the discussion session for Tuesday, March 11, 2025. Ian, you were running the room tonight.
Sir,
Ready to roll?
we are.
All right.
So for the agenda for the regular meeting, we would have a recognition of Kurt Christopher for his promotion to the position of fire chief, recognition of the promotion of Joe Gavita from Mount Lebanon Fire Department to the rank of deputy chief, consideration of bids received for the annual street sweeping program, consideration of the award of the 2025 root damage sidewalk maintenance contract, consideration of the award for the 2025 road assessment sidewalk maintenance program, and consideration of ratification of the manager's approval of emergency repairs to the recreation center ice rink refrigeration system. And that's all for the regular agenda. So first up, we have Robin and Bob from the library to talk about the book sanctuary.
Hi, everyone. Let me get this set up. Thanks so much for letting us come and speak to you today. We are excited to be here, and I have a couple of our friends of the library online, and then also with Bob and myself, we have our board member Pete Halsey and president of the Friends of the Library, Susan Tracy. We're here to introduce you to an initiative that the library is undertaking this year that was stated in our 2025 goals and that we've been working on for several months. At the February meeting, our library board passed a resolution to declare our library a book sanctuary. The book sanctuary movement started in 2022 when Chicago Public Library, as well as the city of Chicago, declared themselves book sanctuaries. And a book sanctuary protects intellectual freedom and the right to read. Many libraries in the US and Canada have since embraced the movement, as well as some of the cities that they serve. The Chicago Public Library states that any person or place can declare themselves a book sanctuary as long as they commit to preserving and sharing challenged materials and intellectual freedom. So while on their website, they have something like 4,800 recognized book sanctuaries, only a handful of those are actually public libraries. We plan to go public with this resolution during National Library Week because we see this as a celebration of the work that libraries do every day and to promote our continued commitment to intellectual freedom. We've designed the logo that you see on the slide, and we'll have t-shirts, pins, library cards, and other ways for staff, volunteers, and patrons to promote this initiative and show their support of library services. Our library, as we investigated this movement, we realized it's really about going back to the basics and recommitting to the roots of library service. Public libraries, as they look today, spring from three important publications. The first and most important is the First Amendment of the US Constitution, because this protects intellectual freedom for all citizens. The American Library Association created two documents that form the basis for most libraries' policies and services. They are the Library Bill of Rights and the Freedom to Read Statement. These documents, in simple terms, state that libraries are for everyone, that libraries should actively challenge censorship, and that all people should have the choice to access the information important to them. In practical terms, becoming a book sanctuary does not change our services or programs. For us, it's more of an assertion that we will continue to do what we have always done. Provide our patrons with confidential access to the materials they choose for themselves and their children. It's primarily a proactive statement that we will not remove materials from our collection if they meet the standards of our established collection development policy. Patrons will still have the right to ask that we review the items in our collection. We're human, we can make mistakes, something could slip through that doesn't meet our policy. But we will not censor materials based on what any one person believes should or should not be in our collection. It's been established that the municipality trusts us to make the decisions about what is on our shelves for the good of this community. Book sanctuary movement began because of a violent increase in the number of requests to censor items in school libraries and public libraries across the country. In the past, a book challenge would have been one title brought to the library's attention by a concerned patron. Now, political action groups are organizing and disseminating lists of books that they challenge in schools, in public libraries, even in private bookstores. Often the people requesting that books be banned from a library are not local residents, and often they've never read the books in question. As you can imagine, many of these books are challenged because of their content represents experiences of the LGBTQ and BIPOC communities. We've had very few challenges of materials in Mount Lebanon during the nearly 10 years I've been here. However, we are prepared to handle any that we receive. My board, as you know, has been working the last few years to update many of our policies. And we have a recently updated collection development policy and a statement of concern that Phil Weiss has reviewed for us. Any patron with concerns regarding our materials, programs, or displays can share their concerns with us. I'm very proud of our library staff who are responsive to the interests and needs of our patrons and our community. By identifying as the first public library book sanctuary in Pennsylvania, the library board is expressing their confidence in the staff and their commitment to uphold the ideals of public service for libraries. Anyone have any questions for me or for Bob?
No, I guess really the only question I have, I know people have concerns about. I think some of the book banning conversation has been along political lines. And possibly not on content of those books, although as a parent, I know we have a children's section and then we have a general section. So I would imagine that any book that comes into the library is already reviewed for content somewhat and would appear in the appropriate section.
Absolutely. We can't say that we read every single book, every word of every book that comes in our library. That would be impossible. We have over 700,000 physical items. But we do have a collection development policy that all of the librarians follow. You know, they're trained in collection development, and then we follow a policy which requires them to read reviews, to know about authors and about publishers. So we're very careful with the things that we do buy. And since you bring up the fact that there's a children's section and an adult section, one form of censorship is putting an item that really belongs in the children's section in another section of the library. So making a picture book and moving it to the adult section because they're afraid it's not appropriate for children. That's a form of censorship on par with removing it from the library entirely. So that's not something we're wanting to do either. If we review an item and it meets our collection development policy for a specific collection, that's where it will stay.
Okay, great. That's all I had.
And just stating the obvious, but seeming that in practicality, there's no change. You know, it's like, we're doing this. It's the same thing the library's been, as you said, 10 years.
Yes, we
So
wanted to tell you we're doing
Doing
nothing.
this now and suddenly it's a policy change. It's the same policy that's been going on
Absolutely.
for that long. Okay, I just thought it's important for everybody to hear that.
It basically doesn't change the way our library operates at all. What it does is lend our support to the movement as a whole, and gives us some more opportunities to brand these kinds of policies and anti-book banning sentiments and those sorts of things under the book sanctuary branding.
It's helping our library to identify more diverse opportunities for programming, displays, things like that. We'll be having some panel discussions about censorship and about book banning this year. And it's really given us the opportunity, like I said, to look at these fundamental documents that form library services and see what it really means to be a public library. And I think that's more important now than ever. And whatever side of the political aisle you're on, you know, supporting the First Amendment and everyone's ability to express themselves is one of our most basic and fundamental rights, and that's something that a library holds very sacred.
And while these things are not a problem in our library, we're hoping that by being the first book sanctuary library in Pennsylvania, it may inspire some others statewide to do the same.
I'm all for it.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Rodney and Josh from the Inspections Department on the Municity 5 update. The commission heard an initial presentation on this a few months ago, and Rodney and Josh have been working very hard to get more online so that we can get further updates.
All right. I'll tell you, swag.
It's not the hardest, it's.
Thank you. No, I'm not bringing dollars next time, thanks.
Pen to sign petitions.
Thanks for having us tonight, Commission. I know that Keith wanted us to bring an update as far as the final phase of Municity, which is the connect portion of the public facing side of it. So Josh has been working extremely hard on this. And the nice thing about this program is the more you get into it, the more you realize the capabilities of it. Which is somewhat of a challenge, but at the same time, you know, in the long run, it'll definitely pay off. So I'll just let Josh take it from here, and then if you have any questions, let us know.
Yeah, so I wanted to give you a quick rundown of what it's gonna look like on the resident end. To when they log in, they can apply for a permit, they can request an inspection or submit a complaint, as well as some other information they have here as far as the tracking is concerned. You can see here, this is the test site, so you see up here, it says do not use, coming soon. There's just some warning labels here until we get this 100% and put the link on our site. But if you take a quick look, whoops, I'm sorry, I clicked too many things. If you look right here, I'm just gonna walk you through submitting for a permit. Here's the tab for the inspections office. We get through, we have a list of all our types of permits here under each category, both residential and commercial. In this case, I'm in the commercial section, and if you see, actually quite small, there's a pretty good description here of under this commercial building permit of what it is, what's required, as well as any additional information that an applicant would need to submit for this, just to give them warning before they get too far ahead. We go to the next screen. This is basically where they enter the information about what they want to do to move forward with applying for the permit. This is the part I actually kind of like a lot. What'd you say, 430?
434
in Washington. This is where you're entering the address. And it will actually bring up the street view of where you are. So in this case, I picked 434 Washington, which is basically the Zamias property at the corner of Bower Hill in Washington. Figure I pick an empty property, that way it doesn't.
There's a lot of emotions behind that property.
This is the contacts tab. So this is what's going to basically trigger what is tracked for who. So if this is a contractor applying for a permit rather than a homeowner, they'll put their information here where it says add the contact, they're gonna add themselves as the contract. That way, when they go to the tracking portion of things, any person who is the contact info here, it's gonna show in their dashboard for tracking purposes. A contractor is only gonna see the entities they're tied to, so the applications, the permits, the inspections. The homeowner is gonna see everything that is tied to them on that property. So we're just moving forward here that I am the contact for this property. And then this is where you actually upload the documents. So in this case, the three items here are the required documents to move forward with this permit. You can see it says construction drawings from a design professional. MDIA stamped approved plans for mechanical, electrical. And then for all commercial properties, you need a design professional stamp. So they'll actually drag and drop their documents right here in this big gray bar. And then they'll assign it to what it is below here. And if you see, I try to click next, nothing will happen until they put the right documents in. So that's basically, after this, they do a digital signature that actually submits.
Right.
Once a permit is submitted on our end of things, it will show up internally. It will go to Diane, our admin. She'll review the information that's in there, make sure the property survey is in there, make sure the construction documents are in there. And it's gonna show up in a dashboard for her, similar to what you see here, as soon as it loads. It will show up in a general list of items that she can filter out by new permits, by date, how she wants to filter it. And this is everything new coming in. What she'll do is she'll actually go through here, make sure all the right information's in there, and then she'll assign it to the appropriate inspector, myself, Rodney, Brian, whoever it might be. So that's what it looks like internally. for
And
us.
at this stage too, she'll be able to, before she actually creates the application in the system for us to review or to assign it to one of us, she'll actually double check that information to make sure it's all there. So if they say they're downloading a design professional seal or a copy of a survey, and there's a picture of their puppy or something else there, she's gonna be able to reply back to them
Yes.
to be able to tell them this isn't a complete application. Please put this document in and then resubmit it. Once it comes back, then she can then process it to us for an application to be processed.
And she can do that right from the system without having to go to a separate email or anything. Right here. So if you open up that particular application that was in, if you see this section down here that says comments that I just opened, she can type a comment right here to that applicant and say, please submit a survey, not a picture of your puppy, or whatever it might be.
So it stays kind of the audit trail, so
It's-
later going, 30 days later, someone says, what's happening? I sent you a note about this picture or whatever, you didn't reply.
Exactly. It's tied right to that application, right to that property, whatever entity that is within the system.
And the contractor that submitted will see that as well as the homeowner or the property owner.
Once she confirms everything is correct in that system, she'll assign it to one of us, and then it goes into our dashboard for review. So not everyone sees everything at once. It has basically steps. Next, back on the residence side of things, once you apply for a permit, I have some tests in here under my name. If you see this screen here, this is basically their dashboard. This is their tracking mechanism for everything. Once they start applying for a lot of things, if it's a contractor, there's gonna be a lot of information placed here, but it's broken down pretty well. If you see here, this right here says 2 complete, that means there was 2 applications submitted. A drop-down menu, there's the actual applications that were submitted. These tests are already pushed past the application stage all the way to the permit stage. So if you go down here, you see there's permits, there's 2. Open them up. There's our actual permits that are in there. And then we can open up the documents. We can see everything that they've submitted, everything that's in there underneath that permit. So they know that they have 2 permits and their status for those permits are approved pending for payment. So I think we talked in the past, once a permit gets approved, an email goes out from the system letting them know it's approved. And then it'll fall into their dashboard. So it was approved pending payments, waiting
Right.
for their payment.
And then that email will outline each of the cost factors.
Oh, good.
So for example, a building permit, it'll tell you what the fee for the building permit is. It'll tell you the state fee was $4.50 that we have to send to the state for every permit. It'll tell you if we had to make 2 copies of surveys, then we're gonna charge for that copy fee or enlarge a survey
Right.
because it was submitted not to scale, then we can add all that in there. And it'll be outlined as far as fees.
In the case of someone applying for a permit, it's still an application, but not yet approved.
Right.
It shows up in this top bar, application with the status of pending. So they know, in this case, they would know if there was a pendings tab here, they know they have 2 complete applications, maybe 1 pending application. They know it's yet to be reviewed. Moving farther down the line,
You had a question?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm just curious regarding there are various people that can submit this, right?
Correct.
Is there some flag or requirement that the property owner, is, has blessed this process?
There is in a digital signature when they apply, under the disclosure, there's our language from our applications that basically says you are.
You are the property owner, you
Or
are.
you're an authorized
You're an
agent.
authorized agent of the property owner, so that they provide their digital signature.
Okay.
I've copied the language.
Well, I was just thinking it would be nice just to make sure that, yes, the property owner did.
Well, what will happen too is if somebody submits an application, they have to put in the owner's email address.
Right, but do we have to get a response back from the property owner?
We don't necessarily need a response, but an email will go out to them saying that somebody has applied for a permit for them. So we assume that if that's not the case, they will contact us and let us know.
He's putting an addition on my house.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of.
No, there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. I
Right.
just-
I understood. There's been situations where I've called someone and said, hey, this person's applying, listed you as the contractor on this property, because I have nothing to do with that project.
Right.
You know, things like that, just random. Yeah, so I understand. Moving forward, once permit's issued,
Wait, hang on, I'm sorry, just
Yeah,
to
go
follow up on that, do we have like a physical letter that goes out to the property owner?
within Municity, there's a letter that's generated once a permit has been applied for or once a permit has been issued in both cases.
Got it.
That goes out via email as
But
long,
like physical,
You meant, do you mail it? No.
physical.
we do not. No.
No,
Is
the
that-
only thing, the physical that we'll do is violations.
Got it.
So if somebody sends in a complaint, it gets logged as a complaint, so they can actually file a complaint as well.
I was just thinking of the situation you brought, because I was thinking as we were going through with the names, what if somebody applies for something, at an address, but how prevalent is that? Like that people are applying for things at addresses they don't own.
Exactly, and plus, if a contractor applies for a permit, let's say for a driveway, and then another contractor is hired by that property owner and they do an addition, the driveway contractor can't see the information for the addition permit. He's only gonna be able to see the information for the permit that he applied for,
Yeah, the
and
one,
just that. Whereas the homeowner will see everything.
any entity within the system that is tied to their particular name is what they will see and only what
Right.
they will see. So as the property owner, you're gonna see everything on your property, but as the concrete guy putting in a driveway is not gonna see the information on the addition that might be going on at that property.
How would if the property owner is not the applicant, how would they get into the system?
You can just log in to their dashboard. So the link will be on our website. Right now, it's under My Lebo.
Yeah.
There's a box for apply for a permit. The link's gonna go there under My Lebo.
Yeah.
And I intend to do some sort of video or some how-to instruction on what to do and how to use it.
Yeah.
They can go in, they'll log in, and they'll be able to click and look up their property, and they'll see anything that, they create an account within this, and then they'll see anything.
So it's like somebody on the back end has to approve that, like match that they're the owner of that property.
Right.
Right.
It actually brings up a warning window where you have to type in some particular information about your property to make sure you can claim your property kind of thing.
Ah, okay.
But so then once you claim that property, regardless of whether they fat finger your email address, the permit's tied to that property and therefore you should get notice.
Right, you should get you should get an email from a no reply from the system to your email as long as your email is within the system.
I'm thinking about your question, Mr.
It's kind of like an order of operations,
Yeah.
like
No, it's just like, when you have some snail mail, like if you change something at the bank and they send something to your new address, your old address, just to make sure that was you, that changed addresses and going, just something, I mean, the paranoid world we live in,
Yeah.
of going, just something in the mail that someone goes, I didn't apply for that. And it could be good natured, just someone fat fingers the email address. And, the person thinking, oh, why am I not getting anything from inspections? Because you put the wrong email address on.
Right.
But the only way you're gonna find out is either that person says, I've heard nothing, or the other person says, why am I getting all this activity with the property? I don't know, it just feels like kind of belt.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, because if the owner,
Something they have.
if the contractor, by far, the complaints that I get related to permitting are when there's bad communication or no communication between the resident and the contractor. most residents I know would prefer that the contractor just do everything. But I would even say a majority of the complaints that I get are because the contractor outright lied to the resident. Told them
Yeah,
one thing, couldn't get a
absolutely.
permit, thought they could do it easier. Turns out it's gonna cost them more money, so they just ghost the resident. And then the resident has to hire new contractors or things like that. So I'm just looking at this as kind of a way to try to step in front of that. So like if a contractor applies for a permit, how, and the resident is not already registered as an account, they would never know.
They would never know, but at the same time, there's a couple of catch things within the system. For example, like right now, if you file paper and pencil, you have to sign at the bottom of the application that you're an authorized agent of the owner. We don't send out a letter now with a paper copy saying, hey, did this contractor have permission to file for a permit for you? But we also, when we send out any comment response email, so for example, you need a survey or you need, you know, additional construction information on a particular project, we send that email out, we'll copy the homeowner so that they're aware of it as well as the contractor. So if the contractor submit, we're still contracting the homeowner to make sure that they're aware of it.
I just wonder whether we could use this to improve the process, because again, like all the complaints that I get are for bad communication. And often the contractor is not telling the homeowner something.
Understood.
Most of it is around when the contractor comes to you and we give them a laundry list of stuff they need to fix, which is invariably something they didn't expect. So now the contractor has to spend 3 times more money and their quote to the resident's not valid. That's like 90% of the complaints that I get. So one way to solve that problem would be when a contractor submits an application, we immediately get the resident onto the system so they can see what's going on from scratch, right? Because presumably, when that contractor submits the final application and then you review it, those comments are gonna be in the system, right? You need to do
Correct.
X, Y, Z.
Correct.
That is currently a point of contact that the residents miss or are purposely misled on. So I'm wondering, how do we get the residents signed up the moment an application goes in? So like if we,
Because that's part of the application. You have to
Right.
Put in.
Yeah, if we require them to put their email address in here, they're gonna get notification that there's something on their property.
Yeah.
If they are not the applicant.
And the system will update weekly with the new transfer of properties. So we get the same data that the county has when a property transfers.
right,
And if there's an existing permit or if there's an existing condition within a property that we have the property owner's contact information, we'll be able to double check that if somebody submits, because in this system, everything's tied to a contact. So if we see that we have 3 of the same contact with all different information, that's gonna throw a red flag to us, hey, we need to reach out to this property owner.
sure.
Find out who it is.
Yeah, I just keep coming back to the timing of this, right? Like, I'm sorry to keep harping on it because we're talking about different things. Whether we have their information is different than they're actively in the system looking at what's going on.
Right.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we get that homeowner actively in the system looking at what's going on?
Perhaps maybe we can do something on the website to do a push, like he said, with the video to make sure that, you know, we do some type of public relations as far as advising people, hey, the system is live. You know, feel free to go on and actually log into your property and create an account. You know, that way we have your contact information. You know, I'm just thinking out loud, maybe that's the best way to handle it.
Is there like a postcard we could send them that says, you know, like when an application is triggered, an application for a permit has been, you know, put into the permitting system for this address, that goes to the owner. If you're the owner of this property and you haven't already created whatever username, log on now, here's how you do it, with a link that gives them instructions.
I mean, we can look into that. The thing that comes up with that is the cost of the postage,
How many applications do we get per year?
about 1,000.
Just think about that. Okay.
Yeah.
I,
so-
I like where you're going. I think it's worth a
Yeah.
discussion,
Yeah.
but where they're going, I think is.
And we can have a discussion with Municity as well to see if they've run into that same situation and see if there's there's already a solution out there
Sure.
as well.
That makes sense.
Okay, yeah, great.
Yeah, let's find out. I mean, we're clearly having the
the
same
price of
concern,
it.
but these folks have been through a bunch of times and they have some tips for us.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't wait.
Just a couple more little tracking things up here. Once a permit's issued, here's a list of inspections. And they can request an inspection directly through that actual permit right here under their drop-down menu. That way, and then they'll show the results here. If you see over on that far tab, and it's a little hard to see, but right here, it all says pending.
Right.
As they go through a project, they can see that, you know, their contractor called for the installation inspection, the drywall inspection, but maybe missed something here or there.
And they'll be able to see our notes as well.
Yeah, they can track all that information right here under their dashboard. Issues, complaints, notices of violation, those things, it all shows up in their dashboard here. Right now, there's none on the test, but they would show up under issues down here toward the bottom. But this is their basic menu on their dashboard that's gonna track every bit of information that's tied to their, like I said, their particular entity. If it's a contractor, it's not gonna be everything on that property, but if it's.
It's only gonna be that permit that they applied.
Yeah, and if it's a contractor, it might be 10 different properties, because they might do work all
Yeah,
over Mount
all of
Lebanon.
them, Sure,
Right.
yeah.
So this is, I think, a very big help on their end to see where things stand.
And anytime that we touch it in the system, so for example, it gets referred to us, we pull it out, we review it, we send them comments, it'll all be tracked through there. So everybody that is logged into that particular permit or entity, they'll be able to see the status of each step as if they go through.
Right.
Yeah, there's actually a option within this system when they apply for a permit to subscribe. And they will get an email from a no reply email from the system that basically tells them anytime we touch it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It happened as an error not too long ago because they did an update and we started getting all these reply emails for everything that we've touched. It was hundreds. It was just.
Oh, wow.
I mean, from a perspective of a homeowner, when it's working correctly, if we go in and change a fee, they get an email that says we changed a fee.
Good.
So that's the gist of what shows on the resident side.
Yeah.
You can see in the background here some photos, you can see off the side there, the rollers there. This is some photos from in town, just so it blends in with our website.
Right.
It looks like it's supposed to be for Mount Lebanon.
And they'll be able to also see the documents associated with their property or with their permit that they applied. So.
When do you think they're live?
We are about 95% with this, with a few tweaks with language. Then we have to put the payment processor in. We can put this live on probably in the next few weeks on the website.
Love it.
The payment processor is gonna be a little bit longer, but we can put it out so they can submit digitally and then
Right.
just pay for something in person, and then later we can put it out with the.
So we can
payment
put a
processor.
caution note on the system, basically saying, hey, but at the same time, I think we ought to put together that video first and maybe work
How
with
to.
Laura to see
Yeah, yeah.
how we can actually
Yeah.
put something on the
I'll run through
website.
how to and all
And a
that.
podcast too.
Yeah.
Do a podcast.
So I just have a couple more questions.
Sure.
One is, do we have the ability to use custom domains? I see it's like City Square. I don't know if that's the final domain, but so like One Stop Pittsburgh is One Stop pgh.pittsburghpa.gov. Are you able to check if we can do like, permits.mountlebanon.org? Something to that effect, so that it's,
Check
I
with
can
them.
do a referral from our site if you want. It could be mountlebanon.org/permits.
Something
But
like
once
that.
it lands.
I'm talking about the actual domain, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I was
I'm not
thinking-
sure.
Yeah. You might want to check with them on that.
I say just someone gets an email to say it's from Mount Lebanon as opposed to some, you see, they're like, what's
Well, that
that?
definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to make sure that like internally branded, Mount Lebanon, all that stuff, but even the external branding of the domain name is like City Squared, like I would go that and be like, is that really Mount Lebanon?
Right.
So like I would,
see.
like most
Yeah.
software that like you're
Understood.
spending, I would
Yeah.
imagine we're spending a decent amount on this, like if it's more than $50 a month, you should have the ability to do like a custom domain. That's one. The second one is like the design and the fonts are off, like that's definitely not like Mount Lebanon font. So I would say maybe check with Laura and get the style guide and try to, work with Municity to, you know,
Mount is not spelled out,
Yeah.
just BMT
and
period.
just the colors and the
And
text.
we're still working through a lot of
Yeah.
tweaks like that we found.
That's designed. So the other one I have is really for Phil. So like, you know, what are are there any legal ramifications that we have to be aware of here, right? Because when someone applies for certain types of permits, we have to issue decisions in a certain period of time, right? So the reason I'm asking this is Rodney or I think it was Rodney brought up, like if someone submits an application and it's not a design drawing, it's like a picture of their puppy, like I wonder whether that doesn't matter. Like, so if they put an application in on February 1st, are there applications they could put in through this system that we legally have to give them an answer on by a certain period of time? And if we don't, they could move forward with that permit without our decision. So we may, regardless of whether that application is quote unquote complete, by them submitting it online, is there some reliance or understanding that that's an actual application and they're moving forward with those plans from a legal
It's
standpoint?
talking about the deemed approval thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll see a couple things. One, no different than if they just dropped the puppy, picture of the puppy off today in a
Yeah,
packet.
right.
Right.
And with that, in all these cases, there's a couple things. It's on us to respond. It's not complete.
Okay,
Not complete, the time doesn't start running.
okay, that's
It's
the
also
question.
not gonna start to run until they pay.
Okay,
Oh.
so
yeah,
just by
of course.
us
Well, that
deeming
makes-
not complete,
Right,
then that clock isn't started.
right.
All
Yeah,
right,
and
so
like
that's
I said,
good.
Correct, and that responds back, if they make an application online, that responds back to them. Once we accept it to make it an application, then that basically starts the clock. Because we respond back to them saying, it appears that by us accepting it as an application, it's basically saying that you have all the information there.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
And they have to pay.
I want to I agree with that point, but I want to go back to your point before. This is a resident facing application.
Mhm.
It is now, my expectation should be fully compliant with any design guidelines of the website. Period. End of story. It should look and feel like Mount Lebanon website. So if that needs to go to PIO, okay. Yeah, you guys are an inspector. Okay. I understand that's not your expertise.
No, I totally agree.
The front,
Your
the front end is not your problem.
yeah, because there's stuff there, just design stuff, guidelines, some of the style guidelines, colors.
Yeah.
Logos, fonts, all that, yeah.
Cool. That's great.
Next up is Gateway with a review of the bids for the swim center filtration system.
Yeah.
Gateway Andy.
I figured I'd back up Dennis here a little bit.
So, we were in front of you previously to discuss the pool filtration project. I think that you are all aware of it now. This is actually the results of the rebid which occurred last week. And just a quick site of the project site. The work here is, primarily internal with some work out on the deck. Again, the project included replacement of the pool filtration system and including installation of the surge tank. That surge tank would be actually out underneath the deck. And then minor renovations to the building in order to accommodate the new filtration system. With that, there were 2 add alternates and a deduct alternate. The first add alternate was actually where the filtration system was to be placed, a floating deck so that there was room underneath it for storage. minimal, but it was just an additional option to consider. And then, the second ad alternate was for installation of liquid chlorine, as in opposition of what is used currently, the tablets are used currently. That was to be placed outside in a containment unit on the deck. So that was ad alternate 2. And then the deduct alternate was considered for installation of a half-size version of the surge tank that was to be used, just as an option in order to consider potential cost savings. The designer primarily was Councilman Hunsaker, who was utilized as the aquatic specialist for this. Gateway Engineers assisted in developing the plans, the structural components of it, as well as the specifications. The initial bid that was received, when this was bid the first time, there was only the one bid, was a little over $1.6 million. The bid results, as you can see here, there were 2 bidders this time, Shiloh Industrial Contractors, who had bid the first time, bid again this second time. Their base bid came down to $1.321 million. And Mainline Commercial Pools is the second bidder at $1.445 million. Just a couple of quick photos here. The center picture is actually a picture. This is the current filter system or current filter tank. And I know it's very small, but the work again is external out on the deck. This is where the surge tank would be placed. Internal is where the new filtration system and new piping would be set up. Again, just a quick summary of the bids. Only one was received the first time, 2 were received this time. It is very specialty type of work, being that it is aquatic pool related work. And this project in particular has a high component of general contractor work in terms of installing the tank and some of the work internal as well as the aquatic work. The base bid cost again came in about $330,000 less than the original bid that was performed. The original anticipated cost for this project prior to formal design was around $786,000, but following the final bid and final design and considerations from coordinating with contractors, there was an expectation that the bid would come in somewhere around $1.4 million. Just as a comment to electrical work is not included within this just because it is specialty to an electrical prime. So that work was or has been quoted separately and would be awarded separately if this project is awarded. The expectation is that it would be under $35,000 under the bid threshold. Again, just in coordination, and David can speak for himself, but in talking with David, as well as municipality, the expectation would be not to award either of the ad alternates or the deduct alternate, or to reduce it by the deduct alternate at this time. Again, the ad alternate work, at least the work for the liquid chlorine, could be done at a separate time altogether. It does not need to be done necessarily right now. And as far as the deduct alternate, that would create other complications with permitting and getting permit approvals, as well as in the future, most likely you would have to install the rest of, or a second surge tank, which you would lose any efficiencies with construction by coming back and constructing a second time. And with that, just if this contract were awarded or set to be considered for award at the next commission meeting on the 25th, if it were awarded, the notice to proceed wouldn't be until the second week of September, after the closing of the pool and after any winterization. And so the contract time would essentially be from then until April of 2026 for the contractor to be completed. And that's the general summary of the bid that we received. I don't know if there's any questions.
The only question I have is the exterior work. So you outlined in one of the slides, like the project area. But I'm just curious, like if there are renderings of what it will look like afterward.
It will look as it does now afterward.
So
So
everything is-
all the work is underground, so it's under the tank or under the deck. So there would be a tank installed. So there'll be new concrete.
Right,
but
just opened
other-
up and then put back.
Yep.
Got it, okay.
So is the commission good with us putting an agenda item on next meeting for the approval of this?
Yeah. Yes. Perfect. Slay.
So just one more question. So the thing that you had there was for basically late September to early April. Do we have any more hard like numbers? Like it's been my experience that when you leave it open, they think it's gonna take 3 weeks. It's like, it's like doing homework. They wait till the last minute and then they claim that there's bad weather. Like, the weather is pretty junky in March and April when you can get in and do concrete work.
And it's
So
a
I just see like,
Contract that says you have to have it done.
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's been my
Yeah,
experience, that's
yeah,
what contractors will
instead of
do.
giving that window,
Right.
ultimately in the contract did just state needs to be completed by that date. But in discussions, the reason, and even part of the reason for the rebid, initially we were bidding,
I saw
you may
it.
recall, in December,
Yeah.
trying to get done for this year, and that would have been a very difficult schedule.
Sure.
The anticipation would be, and in discussion, would be that the majority of the work would be completed prior to weather even getting bad, especially that, any concrete work or anything like that, but there's not a specific provision kind of requiring certain work be done at certain times. So again, we didn't want to necessarily limit it with trying to reduce cost, wanted to make sure that we were using that full open season.
Yeah.
But I think likewise, I think we'd have an extra level of scrutiny for somebody that, with the notice to proceed date of that second week of September, we would expect that they're starting work that second week of September, not waiting till January or February that following year to start.
Is there anything else?
Hey, Craig, I'm gonna jump in here. It's Dan. I'm sorry, I'm listening from afar. I just wanted to say that we would require the contractor to produce a schedule, and we would make sure that, the heavy work on the deck is done first and out of the way in the good winter months. We reserve the rights within our contract documents to review the schedule and sort of enforce that to the contractor. So we wouldn't allow them to wait till last minute to do anything.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Sure.
I guess it doesn't conflict with any, like, they're not doing pool parties or even private parties
No, they close.
outside of
Labor
the
Day.
pool.
Right, we scheduled it for when we're closed.
Yeah.
And they should have plenty of time to complete the work. I mean, we did the whole pool in a little over 9 months. I mean, this should be very achievable as long as they get their parts in and get everything underway. This should be a very achievable
Just had
schedule.
a 5-year sidewalk project.
Well, I know, I knew
What
I
happens
knew
are
where you were
Two different
thinking.
things. Yeah.
I hear you. Andrew, did you want to speak to financing or anything?
If they have a question on it.
Okay. No, okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Sidewalks.
Speaking of sidewalks, that's a very good segue. So the Woodland Drive sidewalk project has been one that we've been rolling forward with. I know I've given a lot of updates to the commission over time. And just a brief update on where we are in the process right now. So the commission had allocated funding for the project as part of the 2024 budget, and that's part of an unassigned funds conversation as well. Residents were initially notified with letters in June of 2024. We had a neighborhood meeting in July of 2024. Additional letters were sent earlier this year. Gateway has worked on and prepared the bid documents. As part of that process, there was 4 additional properties that were identified where some additional driveway work was gonna be needed outside of the right of way to smooth the transition between the existing driveway and the sidewalk. So additional letters were sent out to those properties in February as well. So I know the commission's been very interested in this. Of the 29 properties within the scope of the project, we've received 18 agreements. So on the screen, the yellow dots are the properties where we have received agreements from. And then the 11 outstanding properties are listed there as well, since the property addresses on the map are very small, but it'll be easier to see the ones that haven't. I would say, interestingly, the properties closest to the school have all submitted their agreements so far. The ones further away from the school have been a little spottier, obviously with Foster Elementary, right around the corner here. But nevertheless, this is where we are right now as far as agreements received for the general project contract. So the commission will recall from prior presentations that we can proceed with the project. And at some point, the commission will have to approve a resolution to order the sidewalks in. As part of that resolution, we'll also accept the agreements that have been signed by however many property owners have been submitted by that point in time. Those property owners that have submitted agreements will be eligible for the cost sharing formula that's part of the 2023 sidewalk policy that the commission passed, which would be essentially 10% of the cost on the property owners, 90% by the municipality. And then for the residents that have not submitted agreements, they would not be eligible for the cost sharing at the time when the resolution passes. So they would be essentially responsible for 100% of the project cost within their property boundaries. And that's in line with the way the ordinance reads, the sections of the code that we've relied on and communicated throughout this process. So these are the 11 outstanding properties. A few of them have reached out to me. I have a star next to 10 Woodland because we've been going back and forth with that property owner. I know Phil's had some conversations there as well. So we're confident that we can get a few more agreements done as well. I think maybe a few property owners are still waiting to see what the bids come in at and what their final, cost numbers are gonna be before they sign the agreement. So that is the next step in the process. Oh, also the supplemental driveway agreements. This is just an example of a few of the driveways that have a fairly steep slope coming off the road where we have to do some additional work to kind of smooth that transition between the driveway and the sidewalk. But of those four, 3 of the 4 have been received and just 1 is outstanding. And we'll continue to work with that property owner to get that agreement. So the next step, the bid documents are ready to go. Gateway has published, or is ready to publish them as soon as we get a thumbs up from the commission. And then after we review the bids and this determine which one's the low bid, and we'll be able to share additional communications with the residents to say, this is what your share of the cost is actually going to be, because up till now, it's just been estimates based on the engineer's probable opinion of costs. And then when the commission votes to accept the bids at a public meeting, you also have to consider a resolution to order the sidewalks in accordance with our, ordinance requirements, and then accept the cost sharing agreement. So the one decision point for tonight is if the commission feels ready for Gateway to release the bid documents.
Yeah.
Well, the question I have first is, what is the process that we go through if we don't get those agreements from residents?
If for the residents, we don't get the agreements from, then we notify them of their full cost for the project. The sidewalk policy does say that residents can pay sidewalk installation costs over a 3-year plan if they decide to take advantage of that. But if not, then we would have to file a lien on their property.
I'd like to find out what this thing's gonna cost.
So you're saying we should release the bid?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
I'll find
I'm
out.
just making sure.
Find out what's gonna cost.
So that's
Everybody okay with releasing the bids?
2 for.
Yeah, 3 yeses.
Okay, all right, so that takes care of the next step. So Gateway, Dan, I know you're on the line. Josh, I know you're here too. We can put the bids out and see how they come in. And then we'll continue our communications with the residents as well, once we get the bids in and know what the low bids are and
Right.
continue all that. So if any residents have questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the website, so you can find it, imcmeans@mountlebanon.org. So feel free to email me if you're one of those 11 residents who have not submitted a cost sharing agreement yet. If you need another copy of it, then I'm happy to provide it to you. And if you have questions, the solicitor and I are continue to be willing to work with you. That said, just as another reminder, at the point where the commission does pass the resolution to order the sidewalks in, that is kind of the drop dead date for when residents can actually submit those cost sharing agreements. And residents have been notified of that by multiple letters that were mailed to their house.
I guess it's kind of a dumb question, but like, if we don't get an agreement, what would be the drawback of just giving them a cost sharing price? Because if they're paying the full price and that presumably would be the price that we would lien their property if they don't pay, wouldn't we just do the cost sharing price for the cost of that lien?
No, the agreement, they waive some rights.
Understood. Okay.
And
Got
that's,
it.
So that's
that's the incentive.
the reason we do that and it fixes our costs and we don't.
Understood. Okay, that makes sense. Got it.
Yeah.
Has that been like, I haven't seen the letters that have gone out. Has that been made like clear? Yeah?
I think so.
Yeah.
We had a public meeting that
Yeah, I know we talked about it.
Yeah,
but yeah.
pretty clear.
Just wanna make
I mean,
sure.
it's, it's hard to say, people.
Because what,
And we're all human and sometimes we hear what we want to hear. you know?
yeah, I mean, I just want to take a little extra diligence with it because
Yeah.
what we're doing is we're
Yeah,
gonna be installing sidewalks, which residents have told us is a top priority.
right.
But if someone does not agree,
Hmm.
does not want to do any kind of payment on this, and we lien their property, that's a situation where their property could be sold because they didn't pay for a sidewalk. I just want to be clear what we're talking about here.
Yeah, or just that, like it starts to accrue interest and sits there and they forget about it. Comes up when they're ready to sell the property and then.
Right.
It has to be paid for, right? Yeah. But I mean, this would be a municipal lien, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So a future commission could decide, let's clear house on liens and sell properties. And someone who didn't pay for a sidewalk, their property could go to a sale.
Conceivably, yes, I guess.
Conceivably.
Yes, not usually what we do, but.
Talk about boards and authorities,
Yeah,
because I see Rodney's in the audience. I'm gonna put him on the spot here for a second to give us a little update on, come on up just to give a quick update on Historical Society. I mean, to talk about the porch, the
rooftop
deck, rooftop deck.
Oh, I sent a letter on that.
So I haven't had any
I haven't either.
response concerning that for quite a while.
Okay.
The last response that I responded to was the building code requires and has required since the inception of the statewide code in 2004, has required 100-pound live load for rooftop decks. And originally, because of the initial construction on that building, I believe they calculated it into less than 40 pounds per square foot. And through calculations of what's actually there with some beefing up, I think they were able to get it to a 60 pounds per square foot. But the last renovations that they proposed to get to 60 pounds per square foot included removing the deck lid itself, or the roof deck lid, like the rubber roofing and the decking underneath of it, sistering new joists next to the existing roof rafters. And my suggestion was, well, if they're gonna go to that extent, instead of replacing it with just a typical 2x material, like a 2x10, that they use a better grade of lumber, which they call structural select. So there's like no knots in it and it's a lot stronger than a grade 2 lumber. Or they go with a engineered wood product and sister that next to it so that they can obtain the full 100-pound
Right.
live load.
Live load.
Once they receive that, then the permit can be issued because they meet everything else as far as the design. They want to limit the occupancy, and unfortunately, there's no capacity, or there's no sections within the building code that limit the occupancy. There's a couple ways of setting the occupancy. It's by design, there's by a table in the code, and it's your exit capacity. So that limits your occupancy to an extent, but it doesn't prevent there's no allowances in the code that say, okay, I only want to design that for 10 people to be on that rooftop.
Right.
You know, because there's no way anybody can control that at any one time
Right. And you're still waiting to hear back from their architect?
Correct. with any new proposals as
Yeah.
far as updating that.
I sent a letter to Jim Wojak when he sent a letter to the commission, going back to him again and saying that it had to go according to code with a live load. Live loads are very important, from static loads. And never heard anything back. So I saw John Delano the other night at an event and I said, John, I haven't heard anything back from Mr. Wojak or anybody. None of us have heard a thing. You know, let us know where you are on this. Haven't heard a thing,
We have
so.
a meeting coming up later on this month, so I
Yeah.
want to be ready for when,
Yeah.
when if the subject comes up.
Well, and there have been suggestions that, Mr. Sarver interpret the building code differently, and I was very clear that that isn't within Mr. Sarver's responsibility to decide how to interpret the building code. Building code is the building
Yeah,
code,
code's
and it's
code.
there for a reason,
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
And through the state adoption process of the statewide code, somebody can appeal to the Board of Appeals,
Right.
but it's not a variance like a zoning variance where you get a waiver of complying with the code.
Right.
There's no variances from sections of the code. What they call a variance in the statewide code is basically somebody submitting something that's equal or comparable to what the code implies. And basically, that hearing is basically meant to prove that it meets the intent of the code.
How are you going to comply?
Exactly.
In the end.
So it
comply.
might not be literally how it's spelled out in the code, but in the end result, it accomplishes the same accountability or same end process of what the code requires.
We see that most often in historic buildings, for example, that have one stairway for ingress egress, but someone comes in and sprinkles the whole building.
Right.
Then you've now done enough so that one stairway can be enough as opposed to pulling something off the back building. Sometimes, I mean, it depends on each case, but that's what he means by that you're complying in a sense, a different way.
And we also offered up to basically file a formal interpretation from the code council.
Right.
So the company that actually publishes the code, you can submit a formal interpretation, meaning that you lay out what your design criteria is for that and submit it to them and let them determine whether or not they agree with that interpretation of that code.
Right.
But again, it's clear, I went back in time to the 03 code, which was the
Right.
first code adopted through the state.
Right.
And that same 100-pound live load was in that code as well.
That code, yeah. And it's also important to remember that the municipality owns that building.
Yes.
So if, you know, the historical society goes away and it's given to somebody else, we don't want to be passing a liability on for a rooftop that can't do 100-pound live load.
Thank you, Ron. I want to
You're
be
welcome.
conscious of the other commissioners if they want to say something, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all.
It's got my question and report at the same time.
Yeah. I've talked to them, but I, you know, it's kind of like hearing anything back. It's okay by me.
No, that's what I got. I don't know if anybody else has anything to.
School board has a budget forum on April 7th. It's Monday, April 7th. To review the budget. So public meeting, they typically in the budget forums, they'll dive into the details of the budget and, you know, go through the items, that kind of thing. So
You're still contemplating a millage increase of?
I don't
How
have the
much
final
they can
number.
possibly do.
Yeah, it was, I think the last, if I remember correctly, the last was for an exception above whatever the legal mandated number was.
Yeah.
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 I don't remember the exact amount.
You heard from the library.
Mobility board passed 3 items for our consideration. One is a street design policy that is before us for consideration. There is a proposed resolution to support ARLI, the automated red light enforcement, which again is really just a resolution of support for that type of technology as a tool in our potential toolkit for traffic calming. And then the third item is they moved a item forward recommending spending the 30,000 we allocated to them for their consideration for Kelso. We've had ongoing concerns, raised
Okay.
from residents on Kelso. And there are obviously challenges because it's a state road,
Yeah.
but there are opportunities to do some light types of traffic calming. And so the ask to us is, can the traffic engineer, work within that money and come up with a proposal?
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what we're allowed to do.
So those are the three
Paint,
things
et
they brought
cetera, For
forward.
the crosswalks could be, interesting. Yeah, I look forward to that.
Really, hopefully saying something about Arlene Works, as we know, trying to add a few more tools to our toolbox.
Right?
Yeah, that would be very nice.
Yeah.
Red light enforcement.
Yeah, there was a resident who complained about traffic and people busting red lights and
Yeah.
I think he contacted Rep Miller and Senator Fontana and did not get the resolve he was looking for. I saw an email come across today. I think he reached out to KDKA. It was a story on Arley and why municipalities like ours don't have it.
I shared this same information with the Connect folks in case there are other municipalities that want to express,
Right.
Why aren't we allowed to? Come on. Yep. Bring back off.
Small price to pay, right? I mean, it's a small move to express the support for providing our police more tools.
We already had Keith write a letter to Dan Miller and Wayne Fontaine saying that we wanted to be able to use red light enforcement. So this would be a natural extension of that, I would think. We've already said we want it. Go for it. Doggone it, no more wrong red light turns, huh?
Mr. Chairman, I
Okay,
think
we're good? Guess we're adjourned.
And we're on time. Time to relocate.